In the 1200s, this was the very height of technology. St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, Austria, was a towering symbol of God among his people. Early engineers and scientists reflected on what they saw in the world, and artists used imagination to fill in the rest. Then different kinds of lenses began to open up unseen realms. The first telescopes revealed the sheer enormity of the cosmos. Then early microscopes opened a window into yet another invisible kingdom that had always been there. And the more people saw, the more they understood about life. So here's my premise. We see only a fraction of what's going on around us because of four main limitations. Things are either too big, too small, too fast, or too slow. There is this invisible dimension to our lives. There are all kinds of things happening, but we don't see them. And that should help us understand that there's also a spiritual dimension that may be invisible, but is no less real. When it comes to any concept, perception determines reception. What you see and sense, or don't see and sense, determines how you think or feel about something. And it's the same with faith. So let's start with things that are too big and the need to see beyond the obvious. It wasn't until 1969 that humans began to see the universe in a whole new way. As Apollo 11 sped toward the moon, millions around the world saw Earth as a tiny blue orb, vulnerable and isolated in a vast empty space. The planet hung on nothing, as Job wrote thousands of years ago in the Bible, yet we are the only known life to exist in this part of the universe. The cosmos is so incredibly big, we even had to come up with a new measurement, the light year, the time it takes light to travel 1 year.
The galaxy is thousands of light years across, a huge spiral structure of billions of stars. We live in one of the spiral arms, the Orion Arm, about 2/3 of the way out from the center. From Earth, we see the disk of the galaxy edge on as the Milky Way across the sky. Scientists are only now coming to terms with the scale of the universe. But artists have always explored the infinite, the world beyond the one which meets our eyes, the hidden, the mysterious. Looking up at the stars takes us out of ourselves, gives us a sense of perspective.
Every second of our existence, Earth hurtles through space, a mere speck in a seemingly endless sea of gas, rock, and infinite power. Stars are born, or they die, in a spectacular display of energy.
For a fleeting instant, a supernova outshines a whole galaxy of stars. In 1054, Chinese astronomers recorded a supernova as a star that shone so brightly they could see it in daylight. 1,000 years later, we see the leftover cloud of gas as the Crab Nebula, still expanding at thousands of kilometers a second. All this drama takes place within our own galaxy. But when Hubble was pointed at an empty patch of space and took an image with an exposure of 4 days, this is what we saw. Not black space, but more galaxies. Our galaxy is only one of billions.
We are almost completely oblivious to everything that happens in the vastness of space. So rather than serve the grand and glorious God, we make ourselves the center of the universe. Everything revolves around what we think and feel and want. And without a sense of our smallness in the scheme of things, it becomes easy to let pride and self-centeredness rule everything. We take God off the throne way too often. We've talked recently about how the immensity of the universe should give us comfort that God is in control, especially when we combine that with the promise that He sees even when a sparrow falls to the ground and that the very hairs of our heads are numbered. But we also need to see the big picture to gain the right perspective on our behavior. When we see the vastness of creation, it should give us a profound sense of humility, our dependence on God, and our truly privileged position. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, says James. He created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. He chose to give us birth by giving us His true word, and we, out of all creation, became His prized possession. We can see, in ways James could not, that out of all the enormity, complexity, and diversity of this amazing creation, we are what God treasures most. And our response to that should be one of deep reverence and grateful service. I like that story about the theologian and the scientist who end up sitting side by side on an airplane. The scientist says, "When I look at the vastness of the universe and how small we are, I can't imagine why you believe in God." The theologian said, "When I look at the vastness of the universe and how small we are, I can't imagine why you don't believe in God." Same evidence, different perceptions. It all comes down to whether you believe the force behind that universe is involved with His creation. We affirm that He is. And if we would only remember that in the scheme of things, we are a pinpoint and not the pinnacle, we would be so much better off. But it's not enough just to see beyond the obvious. We must also learn to see below the surface, because while some things are too big for our comprehension, others are too small.
In the 17th century, a few simple lenses in combination made a microscope and revealed a world that we'd never seen before. We found out that a whole world could exist in a single drop of water. A patch of moss looks like a forest, and like any forest, it hides all kinds of strange creatures. These are tiny centipedes, only a millimeter or so long, and a pseudoscorpion, a minute replica of a scorpion. But at the next level, 10 times smaller again, the most numerous creatures are mites. With predators like this stalking the moss, some mites use camouflage. This mite has hairs on its back and attaches all sorts of junk to them, making it look like any other piece of dirt. Other mites use armor plating. Turtle mites can draw their legs up right inside their shell. Seems there's no end to the variety of different mites, all living their lives unseen until technology revealed their hidden world.
Or to put it another way, sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees.
The forest is like one organism. It's linked together at the microscopic level. The roots of the trees are all connected by tiny fungal threads weaving through the soil. Even in the largest forests, a microscopic web of living matter connects all the elements together.
Even light, sound, and heat waves are invisible, except for their effects. But once humans could truly see them for what they were, it opened the door to everything from X-rays to radio. Lots of what we can't see with the naked eye is a huge blessing in our lives, and that's true spiritually too. You know, it's often said the devil is in the details. Well, so is God. So instead of being troubled by those superficial circumstances that we get so worked up about, we need to learn to look deeper and see how God is using circumstances to teach us and to mature us and to shape us. His promise in Romans 8 is that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. So remember, you're not seeing everything. So put your heart and your life under the microscope and let God reveal the unseen truth. In Psalm 139, David reflects on his inability to escape God and says, "Examine me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life." And we do that in the company and encouragement of each other. When our roots grow deep into God's love, we are many but one, linked together for nourishment, strength, and stability. One of the best things we can do is stop. Just stop and look at where you are and where you're headed. The Bible has much to say about how life is both fleeting and fragile, and we're encouraged not to get so caught up in the race that we forget there are consequences to not taking into account God and the unseen world. So we need to see beyond the obvious when things are too big, see below the surface when things are too small, see behind the illusion when things are too fast, and we also need to see beside the reality in front of us because there's more there. In the 1870s, a brilliant photographer named Edward Muybridge went to a California horse farm to settle a bet about how horses run. He set up a battery of 24 cameras activated by strings stretched across a racetrack and captured aspects of motion never seen before.
Muybridge's patron had bet that all four legs of a running horse were sometimes simultaneously off the ground. Stop-action photography proved him to be right.
That was not only the beginning of movies, but also a new phase in the study of medicine and human physiology. But to get the truth, Muybridge and those who came after him had to start with a series of isolated pictures, then speed them up to get the full effect. Sometimes things happen so slowly, we don't grasp the entire situation.
By taking single photographs at longer than normal intervals, time and events are compressed into a dramatic new scale. The 2 weeks it takes for an orange to spoil are telescoped into several seconds. A bunch of unripened bananas mature before our eyes.
Sometimes in life, too, we have to speed things up to see the full picture and the entire process, and that involves both sin and maturity. Harmful things come into our lives and they go so slow we don't foresee the consequences. That's because those things creep into our hearts, they don't race. So we say to ourselves, I can always leave the sin before I lose control. Or maybe we don't even see the threat, and that's because we're looking at a still picture of where we are instead of a moving picture of where we're going to end up. Just as it's really hard to see the growth of someone you're with all the time, it's not easy to see spiritual maturity unfold, especially in ourselves. So we need people around us who can be an encouraging lens through which we see the full reality of where we are and where we want to be. In Ecclesiastes 11, there's a wonderful passage about youth. Young people, it's wonderful to be young, says King Solomon. Enjoy every minute of it. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. And then he says, don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator, because the dust will return to the earth, and the Spirit will return to God who gave it. In other words, life is like slow-motion photography. So see yours as a whole, not just where you happen to be right now, and see others, not just yourself. There's an entire invisible world beyond below, behind, and beside what you can see around you. God is there with His power, His presence, and His unwavering provision. So forget seeing is believing. Cast off the perception, deception, and you'll be seeing and believing to the full extent.